Right on. How are we doing this morning? Who went to church this morning? Okay, because there's a sermon here at 8, right? All right, that's great. Well, I'm glad to be here. I can't thank Bert enough for the call a few months ago. It's been a life-changing experience even at this point in my career, at 42 years old and still evolving and still growing as a coach, and seeing this industry continue to change and expand. When he called me, I was like, oh shit, what am I going to talk about? And it's like, there's so many things to talk about because the journey's so long, right? And we're going to get a little bit into the journey today. I created a PowerPoint for the reason to keep me on task and to keep me on point, because I can go in tangents, people. I can get crazy. Where's Cause? Today's the day, baby. Today's the day, right? So I'm just excited to share my story. Obviously, we're going to start with that, and I'm going to kind of bleed into some of the principles that I've grown into as a coach that I feel have allowed me to have a successful career and how I define success in coaching. How many of you in this room are coaches? All right, right on. I'm going to have an awesome question for you pretty quickly here as we get into building alignment in coaching. Now, alignment is one of those words that when you think of it, it's like a straight arrow, right? It's like alignment, it's like putting all the pieces together and looking straight down. And within that, I define it as establishing a defined direction and following it with consistency and moderation. So I kind of like took that simple word and created it into what I could use in coaching so I can optimize the things that I'm doing with my clients. So today we're going to look at alignment in that way, establishing a well-defined direction and following it with consistency and moderation. How many of you know why you coach? How many of you have a reason why you coach? Come on, really? Okay, everyone should have a reason, right? Keep the hands in the air real quick so I can pick on somebody. Why do you coach? I like to see people win. You like to see people win. Awesome. Anybody else want to share why they coach? You want to help people improve. Right on. Building authentic relationships is another reason. Judd Logan, that goes deep. Right on, so helping others save lives, right, so they can live their best life. So saving their life to live their best life. All right, we're getting deep. I like this. Because you can't do. Awesome. You want to say that in my microphone?
No, it's that thing people talk about with coaches. They say, if you can't do, coach, and if you can't coach, coach gym.
Yeah. That's right, baby. Anybody else, before I cut the line off on why you coach? There's no wrong answers. Right on. Right on. So contributing. Yeah, I think those are all great reasons. And I know in my journey, starting off as in a coach, and maybe some of you guys can resonate with this, when I first started coaching at early 20s, like right out of college, a lot of the reasons that I wanted to coach was so I could have somebody say that, hey, you helped me, and then I could say I'm a good coach, right? Or I could have somebody get on the podium and I look good because of that. So a lot of ego was involved in that very beginning stages. And for some of you younger coaches today, you might be in that phase. We call that the technician phase, where it's just like, I just want to coach everybody and help everybody and do everything. And you can see with the definitions in this room where everybody sits in their continuum of coaching. And it's not to be like, oh, this coach is doing it better than that coach. It's just like we're all in it for a certain reason, and that's what makes it special. But understanding your progression in that and how you keep evolving that so you can continue growing and you continue touching and contributing to this world. For me, coaching is helping an individual evolve to help them achieve their max physical potential. And to do that, I have to know where I sit as an individual. So I have to know me, what my values are, what my beliefs are, and who I actually want to help. And we're going to dig into that more because we're starting with the why, as you can see up here. So the why for me has evolved from not just helping somebody, but now impacting that individual. So it's not just about me, it's about them, and then not just about them, but about all, if that makes sense, right? So that person, if they're at their max physical potential, then I know the next person they touch, they're going to help them improve as well, right? Because that person is being the best person they can possibly be, so that also means that they're going to impact that person in that way, and that just makes it less about me and more about the whole entire picture. Just like being at Sorenex, right? It's about equipment when it first started, with Pops, and now it's just turned into this evolution of growing and sharing and building a culture that impacts more than just equipment, but about human beings. So that's how I look at my coaching career, and that's how I look at my why now. All right. So how? How are you delivering your services? What are the things that you believe in coaching? What are your go-tos? How do you analyze your data? What's your philosophy? So when you're sitting in front of somebody, you're not just saying, yes, 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 I can get you there. You're saying no sometimes. You're saying, you know what, that's a great goal, but you know what? No, you're not ready for that. It took me quite a long time to understand. Actually, I would say into my 30s, I was still saying yes a lot because it was a lot of me and my ego still. I needed to fix that person. If I couldn't do it, then I was a bad coach. Kind of similar to my athletic career. Here we go. We're going to change the gears. Because you'll see how this correlates. In my athletic career, Derek said a lot of great things. But my athletic career was also filled with a lot of emptiness. Yes, I was a 5-time All-American, discus and hammer. Yes, I competed in World Long Drive, only because I had a 4-year drug suspension in track and field. So the next best thing for me to do was actually hit a golf ball really long because that was a whole new sport. And then I ran into CrossFit. I ran into bobsleigh. I was a CrossFit Games athlete. I competed in CrossFit for 6 years. I chased that as hard as I possibly could. Somewhere in there, I did some bobsleigh. And then somewhere in there, I finished my master's degree in 15 fucking years. I don't even know how that happened. Derek's like, you didn't even know I had a master's. You have a fucking master's degree? I'm like, yeah. I don't know how that happened. But what I was trying to say is the reasons that I was doing those things, from the Olympics being right there to not being right there, to getting the call from Athletics Canada the day before I was supposed to fly out to Sydney saying, you have a positive drug test, and everything inside of me that I knew was completely washed out onto the floor, and then all I thought about was my country and my family, and how was I going to make up for that? And I actually tried to make up for that for about 15 years by running my body through the ground, by competing in bobsleigh, by competing in CrossFit, by doing everything I physically could to run away from that and recreate something else. And it led me to nothing in terms of, yeah, I got some medals and I got some things I can hang on the wall, but they're all sitting there in dust now, right? I wasn't really impacting or doing anything great. I was just trying to fix myself. But it wasn't until I asked these questions, it wasn't until I asked why, even if you're an athlete out there, why are you coaching? Why are you competing? Why are you choosing the sport you want to compete in? What do you want to get out of that? What's the long game? I think Derek said it on Friday. Have that vision of where you actually want to go with that, not just running around scrambling, trying to react to something or run from something. So when I speak about coaching and I speak to my athletes, I speak from that depth. I speak from that experience and knowing what is fulfillment, and when somebody's just chasing instant gratification, or if they're chasing a fast track method. Trust me, I played them all. I played them all. So how you coach, your philosophies, your beliefs, impacts who you're going to work with. My beliefs in coaching resonate with my why. So it has to resonate with why I coach. Like I said, I coach to evolve the human being. I coach to evolve the individual. Okay, fantastic. So my philosophy and my methods is the individual. That means I look at the individual for who they are. I ask the tough questions. I continue researching in terms of what are they really trying to get to. We'll talk about consultations in a second. But what I'm trying to understand is the human to see how much truth they're actually showing me in this first little bit of conversation so we can get down to like really what they need and not just what they want. So my philosophy is you got to eat by sitting down and chewing your food. You got to eat real food. You got to hydrate. You got to sleep for 8 hours a day. And if you're not doing the basic lifestyle guidelines, then look where we're starting. We're starting there, so fuck your goals, right? That's my philosophy. Got to get your shit together first. All right. So think about that. Think about your hows. How do you coach? If you're coaching a team, how do you coach teams out there? Right on. So like, it's the individual. It's like, yeah, man, but you got to know each individual on your team because that's going to allow them to feel cared about. It's going to show that you are competent in delivering something needed to them, whether it's a program or not. It's just you understanding that athlete. So if you have that team and you're understanding and loving every single one of your members, their favorite color, their favorite sport, their favorite TV show, get to know your players. Then they trust you. And then you got a whole team of trust. So this can also correlate to that as well. All right. So kind of leading into who you coach, right? So teams, groups, athletes, non-athletes, it doesn't matter. When I first started coaching, I was like, I just want to coach athletes because they're going to make me look good, right? If I get somebody winning a lot, they're going to make me look good. And I coached CrossFit for over 10 years. And I've had numerous games athletes, regional athletes, and from teen level all the way to masters. And that sport in itself is a whole other conversation in terms of how to train somebody for that and how to dig through organization and stuff like that. But in coaching those athletes, it also taught me how to ask the questions of readiness. So who do you want to coach? Who are you coaching? And how are you going to impact those individuals? How many of you are new coaches out there? Like I say new is like less than 2 years. Right on. Yeah. So some of these thoughts, I guarantee you you're not thinking right now. You're thinking, how am I going to work myself up the ladder? How am I going to design that perfect program so the guy that I'm working for, the woman that I'm working for is going to give me the high five or my athlete's going to make the next mark? That's where you're at right now. And that's good. That's good. You got to be there. You got to be there right now, designing programs till midnight, learning and reading those books, being in the trenches, and overworking yourself to a degree, right? You got to have that technician phase where it's just all about focusing on how much work you can actually do to learn from. But if I had somebody at that point in my career start asking me the questions, why are you coaching? Where do you see yourself going in that? How are you going to deliver your services? And what do you actually like about delivery and not like? I owned 2 CrossFit gyms, 2006, 7, way back in the day, when I was drinking the Kool-Aid pretty hard. I think I find a lot of athletes who love adrenaline and cortisol and love running their body like a rented suit, jump into that sport, and especially if you have the strength to do it, like I did, because I strength trained a shit ton and lifted a lot of weight back in the day. It fucked you up, right? Because you're just like, you can dig so deep in a high intensity protocol, especially if you can move right, and especially when someone says to push harder and that's just where you're at. You're like, no problem, I'll push harder and lift more. So that was a crazy journey as well. But I think for new coaches, asking these questions are key components. And if you are a coach who is still in this process, in the last 20 years you've been coaching, these are still good questions to continue asking yourself. So the who. So once you know who you're coaching, we got to understand who they are so we can align it. And remember, this is about alignment in coaching. And I'm not talking about program design yet. I haven't even talked about assessment. I'm talking about you, right now, the individual, what you believe in, what you actually want to, and how you're going to deliver those services, and who you want to deliver them to. So you can see that alignment needs to be in place first before I just start shooting out programs and hoping that people are going to hit something. If I want to actually help contribute and evolve somebody, it has to start from within. So there's my fluffy piece in terms of the life coaching aspect, and some questions that maybe after this weekend you guys can dig into yourself and have a clear understanding of. So getting to know your athlete. Who are we working with? There's a lot of ways to doing this. Some of the principles that I've come to over the years have really been starting with a consultation. How many of you have consultations with your athletes currently? And anybody not know what a consultation is? Right? A consultation is an opportunity to sit in front of somebody and start noticing who you're working with. Start digging deep into why they're there and what they want. So consultation is something that I learned really well. I used to work for a company called OPEX out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was a head coach on an all-male staff team for 6 years. And all those guys are my brothers. They're awesome. And it was an opportunity for me to really grow, to really ask myself even more questions about how am I going to get fulfillment in coaching. Because my athletic career, like I said, was about chasing a lot of things and trying to get people to recognize and be my friend or accept me or say that I'm successful. And I found myself translating that right into my coaching career. And I hit a point in my 30s where I was like, man, this is not what it can be about. Like, me just proving myself in coaching, going from sport to coaching isn't really coaching. So how do I redefine that to make that a more purposeful life? So a life that I actually want to live and a life that I actually want to experience. And so back to alignment, your alignment right now is providing you a specific experience that you're living right now. And the question you have to ask yourself is that experience the one that you want to continue living? If you're an athlete right now and you're in sport and you're competing and you're not really having a good time, you need to keep asking yourself, is this experience I want to keep living? Is this something I want to keep chasing after? Is this something that I want to keep living as a journey? And if it's not, then get out. Do something else. Right? Ask the questions, what makes you happy? What do you want to do? So in coaching, I feel like it's very much the same. Aligning myself, understanding who I'm going to work with so I can have fulfillment in that. The consult. The consult is about noticing. So for me, if I'm sitting in front of somebody who wants to work with me, the thing that I'm doing is I'm noticing what they're wanting. Hey, coach, I want to make it to the CrossFit Games. Hey, coach, I want to ride a 100-mile bike race. Hey, coach, I want to run a marathon, right? Just kind of giving you some examples. And if I was a younger coach, I'd be saying, right on, let's do it. All right, I'll build the program. You're going to be good. We can get this started. And trust me, when I first started even coaching CrossFit athletes, and I wanted to prove myself on a team of like all the guys in my group, right? I was like, when an athlete came in, I was like, yeah, we're going to deliver on that. We're going to get you the games. And I was just like bleeding this, like, I can, we will kind of attitude without even investigating, without even really listening to what the athlete was saying. And they were kind of coming at me in a fantasy type aspect, right? Like, they weren't even real. They were just looking on Instagram all the time and looking at where they needed to be. And I was just kind of like, yeah, we can do this together. So we're both in fantasy land, living this little coaching athlete journey. And then all of a sudden, you know, what happens in 4 months when they figure out like how much work it actually takes to do that? And then I'm like, what the fuck? What happened? You know, and it's like they went to another coach because I didn't get them there fast enough, or whatever the case, right? Small example of like when you don't dig into your shit and you don't dig into the athlete's shit, how sometimes the journeys can lead to nowhere. We're just dancing together, and I'm not a very good dancer, but that's what you end up doing when you don't ask these questions, right? So as I evolved, as I sat in this system, plus we were in a remote system as well, so I was like dealing with people on the screen, right? So I don't know if you guys do any remote coaching, but Skype can only show so much, right? And people can hide whatever they want to hide in there. And I'll get to why I don't do remote coaching as much anymore. I'm actually back to brick and mortar. But with that being said, that consultation is going to bring alive kind of over time, as I grew as a coach, really what was needed and not what they wanted, if this makes sense. So Kat, grab this. When you're sitting in front of somebody and somebody's saying, I want, your experience as a coach, your job as a coach is to bring your experience and the objective. That's your job. Not to freaking hype them up, not to give them like, pump them up and make them feel like they're living in this fantasy world even deeper. Like it's actually to like lay down the law. So you can only do that through experience though. So those of you who are still young, you're still gonna learn this. But over time, after I had so many consults and I started realizing that I was talking to people that were not even a reality of where they wanted to go and what it took to actually get there, I was like, no, man, that's not a goal you can attain unless you want to do that for 7 years. And they're like, 7 years? Like, shit, I deadlift now like, 500 pounds. It only took me 6 months to get there. It's like, yeah, dude, because you were super weak in the beginning. You got really strong really quickly. And now you want to learn how to do a muscle up on a handstand walk, and you've never even done gymnastics in your life, right? So there was a lot of learning within those consultations where I was like, man, I gotta be the craftsman here. I gotta be the person like with some values saying, no, that's not a realistic goal, but this is. And actually, you're sleeping 5 hours a night, you're eating shitty food, and you're not hydrating. So you don't even earn the right to train for that. You haven't even earned the right to do that. So that started shoveling me in a direction in my consults where I was starting to get the right people sitting in front of me at that point. And I had to let people walk away. So some people are like, oh man, I'm not touching that. Like I just want a coach that says yes to me. Good, there's a lot of them out there. Go find them. So over time, for me, it was just more about redefining who I wanted to work with and knowing who I could help, right? How many of you right now are experiencing consults kind of like that? Where you're kind of working with somebody and you're not really sure who you're working with, but you want to help them, so you've just done it. Who's done that? Who's just like, I'm just going to go into this anyway, right? And we're going to do this, and we're not even sure that's just going to turn out. And there's still no guarantees in that. But I think if you can up front get to really who that athlete is or who that individual is, it can set you up for success. A higher probability of success. So with a consult, asking the right questions and noticing, who are you? Why do you want this goal? Why do you want to chase this goal? Okay, cool, because you want to win. Excellent. Great. What have you been doing in the last 3 years to work towards this goal? You just walked in my office, you said you want to win. What have you been doing the last 3 years to say you want this goal? If they said nothing and they want a goal of winning, red flag. Because if they're not already building towards that goal, There's something there that they think they're going to get from you, and that's never the case. We just can't show up in somebody's life and go, poof, here's your goal. There's got to be a lot of responsibility on them, on what they're doing to ensure that they're achieving that goal. So in asking those questions and leading to the next, my next questions are, what do you fill your 24 hours a day with? Like, what do you do within 24 hours? That is a great question, because right away you're going to get when they go to sleep, when they wake up, when they eat their meals, when they train. You're going to start seeing time. You're starting to see a timeline that you can work with as a coach. So let's just say we have somebody who wants to win. I'm being really layman's terms on that. Somebody who wants to win in something, but they only have 6 hours a week to train for that. Right? So you start seeing what they're doing in their 24-hour day and going, well, that doesn't really line up. That doesn't really allow us the time and opportunity to craft that skill. And maybe if we did craft a skill like that, maybe it would be over 10 years, because the amount of time you can actually put into it is so little that that goal is now a longer goal progression. Does that make sense, you guys, in the consultations, right? Trying to understand and notice. Now again, in a consultation, we're not trying to sit in there and go, you should do this, you should do that, should all over them, right? You're just noticing shit. You're just like, oh, interesting. So you think you can do this, you're doing this though. You want to win, but you're not sleeping and eating properly. You want to be a champ, but you're not even working towards your goal currently. You're just showing up in my office with nothing, right? And you can kind of start seeing how the alignment is missed, right? There's no alignment there, and how our job as a coach is to realign that. So realigning those pieces. And that's what I call about needs versus wants. Everybody wants something. Our job is to give them what they need. And that's not sexy and fun. What's sexy and fun? HIT training. Sexy like muscle-ups and handstand push-ups. Maybe it's power cleans for time. Maybe it's a heavy deadlift. But sometimes you got to sit down and go, what does this person actually need? They probably just need to walk in the sun for 60 minutes a day, meditate, eat clean food, come down a little bit so we can get to a place that we can actually work from. Right? So again, I challenge you guys. The wants versus needs. Look at that in a consultation. Look at that when you first meet somebody. Are you giving that client what they actually need? Or are you just getting stoked and want to give them what they want and live this groovy dancing life? And that consult journey, guys, was probably one of the biggest game changers in my coaching career in terms of allowing me to clearly define a path that was going to be long-term. I didn't want to have relationships with athletes for 3 months. I want to have relationships with athletes for years. And I'm not saying that athlete has to work with me all of their life, but I want to know that we're not just on kicking tires journey where I'm just kicking the tires and hoping I can land on something. I want to be on a journey where we're both growing and evolving together. And the consult kind of opens up the doors for that if you ask the right questions and if you're listening and noticing how they're responding to you. I don't know if this diagram actually fits in this part of the talk, but we'll kind of go with it. So time at the bottom, max physical potential here, right? Time at the bottom is like age. So let's say they're like 15 over here. Let's say they're like 70 over here. I should probably bump that out to 90 because the town I live in right now, I live in Jackson Hole, just outside Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I have athletes who are 70 years old, just like crushing life, long-term like endurance athletes, out there on their cross-country skis and like mountain biking, destroying my ass up a mountain. It's amazing, fuck. So anyway, I look at this in terms of consult, right? We look at starting somebody. I'll just make a little circle here at the bottom. But in terms of achieving max physical potential, there's layers to that. Let's say for this specific human being, that's their max physical potential. Let's say at like 25, 30. So knowing where they sit in that curve in their consult is also really awesome. Because if they are a lower training age, if they are in maturation age, that's not, they're slower or the lower end of maturation. If they just haven't had the life experience or the training experience to do what they do, the program is obviously going to look different, and maybe even the consult's going to look different, right? If you're dealing with somebody in that realm. To get somebody to this point is my whole thing is like, yeah, I'm going to get you to your max physical potential, and then even like draw the line now a little bit here. So what I'm trying to do is push out that biological curve that's all coming after us fast and hard, right? So how do I do that? Identify what they need in the consult, look at their lifestyle, talk about how they're managing stress, talk about their training experience, how long you've been training for, and then assess them, which we'll be talking about next. And then I'm going to move to the assessment. How many of you use assessments before you work with an athlete? Wow, that's good. Not everyone's hands in the air. What are you guys doing? Everybody doing an assessment or no? Are we just guessing? All right, shit. I guess we just throw shit on paper. That's all right. No, but assessment, you guys, gives you some insight on starting points, obviously for exercise selection, obviously for designing energy system training if you're working with athletes who need energy system work, understanding of movement patterns, how well they move. I'm not going to tell you how to do all that shit today. You guys got to figure that out in terms of what movement screen you want to work on, what energy system work you actually need to acquire for the people that you work with. I'm just going to give you examples of kind of some assessments that I use for the athletes that I work with and kind of like share that perspective. So assessment. We got to know how they move. We got to know how their joints work, right? With the range of motion, right to left balance, all that kind of stuff. Assessment should be simplified just to give you an intake of like, interesting. Their spine doesn't round at all. It's just a straight flat line. There's like 3 flat spots in their spine when they bend over and touch their toes. Interesting. Oh, their ankle flexion is kind of like the right to left. It's a little bit different. Interesting. Oh, their scratch test. They can't touch their fingers on one side, but the other they can. Right? All you're trying to do is just gather information to kind of get a clue on how to best prescribe a program that's going to allow them success in the beginning. Not just cross our fingers and hope they can make it through the first day. And see, this is coming back to my philosophy. I don't believe in smashing people on the ground the first day. Even though I did it, I smashed people on the ground for years. But now what I understand as a coach now is like, how can I best create a plan and create a system that's now going to have a long-term end to it? All right, so the assessment, movement screen, awesome. I'm going to flash this screen up here. Some of the things that I use in my movement screen: overhead squatting, single leg glute bridge, scratch test, side plank, push-up. Again, simplifying it. How many things can we assess? A shit ton. So much information out there. But at the end of the day, you just need to look at how they're moving in that range and how well they're moving at all. An overhead squat for me, when I get somebody to do it, is pretty legit because obviously if they're squatting like this, there's a lot of things that we can probably work on. And they probably shouldn't be snatching, and they probably shouldn't be doing overhead squats, right? Even with the PVC pipe, they shouldn't be doing overhead squats. Yeah, I know, Derek. So, strength balance. So many ways to look at strength balance. For me, for some of the athletes I work with, I look at pressing to pulling. I look at bending to squatting. I look at those ratios. Again, if you're familiar with Poliquin, any strength coaches that have practiced with ratios, we've done it a shit ton back when I was working with OPEX, because we had to determine if these people were ready to like work a massive amount of dynamic contractions and a bunch of knee flexion on joints that potentially we're not ready. So if their joints were out of balance, guess what? Why would I start giving them 100 pull-ups to do? If they had a really weak posterior chain, why would I start squatting the shit out of them? Maybe we need to like revert back to like some structural balance first so I can actually get them ready to take on the load, if that makes sense, right? So again, the assessment's gonna give you those tools to understand that. Battery is a unique testing tool. One of the best ways that I could determine somebody's nervous system in terms of readiness to do submaximal loads under fatigue was to get them to power clean a max rep. Now, trust me, what's the first thing they have to know how to do? Power clean, okay? So let's just get that real. No one in here, if you don't power clean, you're not doing this test, all right? So power clean, 1 RM, and then I'm gonna set the clock, little timer for 8 minutes, and I'm gonna ask you to go as many reps as you possibly can with 90% of that 1 RM. How many of you have actually done that test? Yeah, it's like some of you in the crowd here kind of chuckling at me going, oh yeah, that's a good one, right? But what I'm actually looking at is your ability to hit the nervous system. So if you think of your nervous system as a light bulb, how many times can I turn that light bulb on as hard as I possibly can over and over and over again? Because why? Because the demand in what sport needs that? Who needs that? CrossFitters? Actually, I'm playing with some of my mountain bike enduro athletes. I'm playing with battery work. Even tactical, I think you could actually apply this test if they had great movement ability in the power clean. I'll kind of share with you another battery test that's more simplified, so if you do have tactical athletes, you can kind of play with that. But with the battery test, it's building this ability, building this capacity in max potential where I can fire that light bulb over and over and over again under fatigue. And that's where 8 minutes comes in. Because I can do that shit for 2 minutes really well, but that starts fading off really quickly, right? About 4 minutes, you're like, holy shit, I gotta bend down and pick this thing up again. So I used to train athletes who would come to me, and that's one of the first tests I would look at is like, okay, where they sit with that, and they'll be like 11 reps in, their power cleans like, for a female, some of the best power cleaners I had was like 230, 240 power clean. And then they'd come in and they'd want to be a CrossFitter. So I'd be like, okay, well, pony up 90%. Let's see what you got. And it's like 7 reps. I'm like, we need 35 plus reps. So 35 reps in an 8-minute continuum for you to even say you want to be a CrossFit athlete. So for me, right away in program design, that gave me an outlet of going, oh, so guess what we need to work on? We need to work on aerobic capacity, because the only way that I'm going to recover after each one of those reps is through my aerobic mechanism, right? So right away it gave me a degree to work on. It gave me a priority for that athlete. If they were super powerful, then I'm going to bleed them to the other side of the continuum in terms of what they need for sport. And then aerobic power is kind of something I'm even playing with now with my mountain bike athletes in terms of, I don't know if you guys know the sport of mountain bike enduro. Do you guys know what that is, enduro mountain biking? We're out here in Southern Carolina. We don't have any mountains out here, I'm pretty sure. But where I live, there's a shit ton of mountains, and we race mountain bikes downhill, okay? But we're not just taking the chairlift up the mountain. We're actually having to pedal your ass up the mountain to that stage, and then you race yourself down. Maybe the stage is 20 minutes, maybe it's 3 minutes. Right? But in a day, you're doing up to 5 to 6 stages. You could be climbing for 4,000 to 5,000 feet within a day, and then having to descend, like in intensity, right, down a really steep downhill track. So to be really great at that sport, you have to have this aerobic ability, right? So you have to have the ability to like pedal your ass up a mountain, but so aerobic that when you get to the top, you're like, yeah, that was no big deal. I just climbed 3,000. Now I'm just going to get on my bike. I'm going to freaking slap myself in the face. I'm going to race down this mountain as fast as I possibly can. And if you know anything about downhill mountain biking, it's not just like, oh, brake, 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 turn, turn. It's like launching off freaking like ledges that are this high with this landing that is like that steep, taking turns with your knee and chest to the ground. Trust me, I just took this on at the age of 40, and it's been enlightening. My mother's like, why? But it's super fun. I actually, it was so fun that I blew out my ankle last year, took my tib and fib, and completely split them in half. So it's like, think about your tib fib and just go like this, like a wishbone. So that's what happens when you take on new sports people and you're going fast at 40, okay? But it wasn't weightlifting. But anyway, so that took a whole summer to heal from. Some metal in my ankle now, but good times. Good times. So that's what happens when you actually plant, turn really hard with speed, and your bike goes completely the opposite way, and you're just like, bam. That was awesome. How the fuck did I get to that story? So let's move forward. Aerobic power, all right? Aerobic power. So you need aerobic capacity to ride your bike. So you're not tired. If I'm tired every time I get to a stage, guess what? I'm gonna not be as good downhill, right? So let's take that in CrossFit. If I don't have the ability to recover from my repetitions after each one over and over again, if I can't make those contractions aerobic, yes, I know, that doesn't sound very scientific, but that's what we're trying to do, is create anaerobic contractions to be aerobic contractions. If I can't do that, then I don't really earn the right to compete in the sport. And that's what takes people so long to get good at the sport, is you actually have this capacity and aerobic ability in all types of contractions. That's why Rich Froning was in the sport for so many years, because everything he did was aerobic. He was working at 80% when everybody else was working at 110%. That's why he won for 7 years straight. People still haven't figured that out yet, but with the changes in the sport, we'll see what happens with people's choices in terms of putting something in front of them and going after it. But aerobic power, so how do I test for that? One of my favorite tests, and you can use this, I've used this with mountain bikers, you could probably use it with a pretty broad spectrum of athletes, and if I had somebody warmed up right now, we could actually run through it, because it's really fun to watch people do it. But it's a 2.5-minute test that basically shows me the whole continuum. It shows me peak power, it shows me their aerobic power, because how they're recovering between each of the sets. So it's a rower, it could be a bike too. I'm gonna go 30 seconds max effort, and then I'm going to rest 30 seconds times 4. So when I say max effort, you're gonna look at that. I get some athletes who are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go kind of easy on the first one because I know the next one's gonna hurt a little bit. No. You need to look at all those 4 sets of 30 seconds, and you need to go 100% in each effort. So you're looking at that, you're like, well, how can I do 100% when I'm only getting a 30-second rest? Very good answer, but that shows me, very good question, what that shows me is your ability to recover after each high-intensity effort, right? So you'll get a score, potentially. I just had one of my Russian athletes a month ago, a guy I still work with remotely in CrossFit. He hit 202, 195, this is meters, 187, and 170. It's pretty fucking legit. So you can't really, anybody can do this test. You'll know right away if you're powerful or not. The higher that number is up top, the more powerful you are, right? So if I'm able to express a lot of peak power, then I can tell with my athlete, let's just say I have an athlete who hits 200, but the next number is 170, 150, 140. I can tell within those 2 tests who's more aerobic, right? To make it more realistic, if this guy's more aerobic, he's probably dampened a little bit, so that top number won't be as high, but he'll still have this attrition that's not as high either, right? So trying to get an athlete who has those hits after high intensity closer and closer and closer together. Somebody like this that shows up and I hit him with that test, I'm like, all right, dude, I hope you love the air bike, and I hope you love walking with the vest, and I hope you love the sunshine, because we're going to be building aerobic base for 2 years, right? And that's what I love saying nowadays. It's like I'll say that shit, and they'll be like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to go next, I want to make it to regionals next year. It's like, dude, you don't even have the aerobic base to do that. right? So that's what I'm saying, like aligning those athletes with truth from experience and having a system that's going to give you those tools to say what they actually need to do. Coolio. How many people in here are actually coaching CrossFit athletes? Just kind of weird, right? Like at Soren X. Yeah, definitely after I competed in the sport for 6 years, I definitely wanted to understand it more. And there was a lot of understandings, but I'll leave you with some simple tools. Even for strength athletes, start with the basic abilities. Don't start with the sexy stuff. So after the assessment, you can determine, oh, this guy needs aerobic work, or oh, this guy needs movement work, because he can't even squat, or oh, this guy needs some strength, like he's just weak. Start with the basic abilities. So in this graph, we're looking at endurance, economy, and strength. So in program design now, moving from assessment into design, those are the three things I look at in my triangle. The things in the between, we got muscle endurance, we got lactic threshold, we got speed. I don't even touch that shit. Because the first things we need to work on is how well you move, your motor control. We need to work on your strength, potentially, and we also need to work on your endurance. Because endurance is going to help you recover from the shit you want to stack up to the top, right? If I want to train high intensity, then I got to build the base. If I want to be really strong, then I better have perfect fucking moving skills. If I want to be a gymnast, then guess where I'm staying in? Motor control, muscle endurance work, or endurance work. So kind of starting with those 3 points makes it easy in design. So how do you progress that? How do you progress somebody who needs to go in an endurance setting? Well, progression in endurance starts with first a base, just like in strength. That means time. If you don't have the time to become aerobic, it's going to show. So time means zone 2, zone 1, working in a heart rate zone of like 60 to 70% of your max, and really putting time into doing that. If I have an athlete who wants to do higher, more intensive work, then the more aerobic work they need to have on the back end of that. And it always doesn't have to be super pretty. It can be just like a hike in the woods, right? It doesn't, like, just keep moving blood, keep building mitochondria, keep developing a base that's going to support high intensity work. So time for endurance is essential. A lot of it has to do with genetics as well. Some of you guys are just not going to be very enduring. It depends on genetics. So you're going to have to work at it. I might throw you some VO2 work just so I can bump that threshold as high as I can, because I know your max potential or your VO2 peak is never going to be that great. Some of us don't show up with a great VO2 peak. I know I don't. So I had to work a lot of threshold VO2 work to bump that and maximize that LT for a long period of time. Strength. How do we progress people in strength? Very easy. You start with motor control. So I start with just movement patterns. That's the first thing we do. We don't throw shit on the bar, pick it up. Or at least I don't. Right? I'm not saying that's wrong, it's just a different experience you're giving somebody. Right? But if I want to provide somebody experience of longevity, then I'm going to work on patterns. I'm going to work on getting these guys to move perfectly in everything that they want to build strength in. If it's wanting to build strength in a hinge, then we're going to fucking work posterior chain. We're going to work single leg work. We're going to work the rectors of the spine. We're going to work how to activate the glutes, how to brace in the core, motor control. So it starts with motor control, and if you look at the strength continuum, we go motor control, absolute strength, explosive strength. Right? We don't start explosive strength because it's fun. Come on, let's power clean today. No. Motor control, absolute strength, then explosive strength. That is the continuum. Always work with the basics, guys. Always go back to principle. If your gut's kind of saying, should I give this person this exercise? Then don't. It has to be 100%. It has to be on that principle line of progression. Economy, skill. So if I'm a mountain biker and I want to be really efficient on my mountain bike, I need to pedal really freaking well, right? I need to have good pedal strokes. I don't want to waste any energy on the bike. If you watch a lot of CrossFit athletes too, or even strong guys with really short hip flexors, this is what their pedal technique looks like on the bike, right? That's not a really efficient technique if you're going to be on the bike for a long period of time. So cleaning those things up, right? Getting an angle on the bike that I can like get this athlete to like put all the power possible in that pedal. So when I think of technique, I think of like, what is the technical skill they're learning? If it's hammer throw, right? I need to drill over and over and over again until I'm sick of drills. That's why you gotta love hammer throw. You gotta love discus, because it is 90% technique. You gotta work that technique. So in terms of that progression, how can I clean up the skill? A lot of times, even with my mountain bikers, I can get them more aerobic just because they're pedaling better, right? Because they're not spraying energy, especially with CrossFitters too. Think about bad, poor movement. Think about how energy is spraying everywhere. If the movement isn't great, maybe they're compensating in another muscle group. Maybe they're fighting, like in terms of structural balance, how to get something done. Well, that's just blowing energy off. So economy and progression of that is essential into building strength and to building endurance. So you see how those 3 points hit first before I get to all the fun, sexy shit, right? You got to have those 3 pinnacles. So I'm coming back to my alignment piece, building alignment in coaching. It starts with your why. Then it moves to how you're going to deliver your services, your philosophies, your beliefs. Then it's going to move to who you want to coach. Who do you want to impact? I know for me, who I want to impact, that's changed as well. From just being the athlete and wanting to coach the athlete, it's changed to goal-oriented, highly motivated, driven individuals. That's who I want to work with. I simplified that down. Now it seems kind of intimidating maybe for some. It's like, holy shit, well, you expect someone to be highly motivated, goal-driven, and blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I do actually. Because then I know I can work with somebody and have them ready to take on a program and be ready to be coached. We can't give somebody motivation. We can't give somebody commitment, right? We have to have them showing up and being ready. So over the course of the time, the people that are coming into my office, they're sitting there and they're knowing exactly what they're going to get, and they know exactly what they need to come to the table with. So who? And then having that consult process, having a time to get to know the individual. Just like getting to know people in this room this weekend. You got to get down to knowing the individual and who you're working with. You cannot bypass that. If you choose to do so, you are living in a fantasy world, or you're living in some place that is going to lead you up the wall, and you're going to get up that wall and go, shit, I didn't mean to get here, right? Because I didn't ask the questions, I wasn't noticing the behaviors, I wasn't leveraging myself in alignment with that client. And then the assessment phase. Have an assessment that is reliable, that is repeatable, that you can actually collect data from and review and know that, hey, this is going to align me to a great program for this athlete, and I'm going to be able to see the things that I need to see in that assessment. And then the prescription. I believe in individual design. Some of you guys believe in group design. For teams, it is about group design, but it's also about knowing those individuals on your team. I'm going to leave you guys with a little quote. Regardless of when in life you started or how burning your desire is to be good, it is critical that you view excellence in athletics as a journey. You can also replace that athletics word with a coach. Not a destination. You will never arrive at a point where you are fully satisfied with your performance. I think for me that resonates just because I still have things that I still want to refine. I still have things that I want to get better at. I still have people that I want to impact. I still have a part of me that wants to learn and grow. And if we stop learning and growing and we just get satisfied on this plateau, trust me, we're not maximizing ourselves, and we're not building what we would call a legacy for ourselves. This journey, even getting to this point and talking to you guys, I've gone over this talk probably 500 times in my head, what I was going to say. And the interesting thing is, the opportunity to come and speak in front of somebody, and if you don't get an opportunity, if you do get one, take it. Because the opportunity is for you to revisit and reflect on all the things that you've learned and the biggest things that you believe in as a coach, and you can actually put it all together and look back and go, yep, that shit I'm proud of. Yep, that's where I want to go in my life. Yep, those are the experiences that I want to live. Because we can live any experience we want to, but I think really trying to find that fulfilling, that happiness, those things that drive us forward in the goals, the things that we want to pursue, when that comes from a place that is true to us, I think those are always good questions to ask. I think those are always good times to reflect and remember the journey you're going towards. I didn't even get to talk about the bar fights. That's for next year. Yeah, I'm really privileged to be here, guys. I want to thank Bert. I want to thank Pops. I want to thank all of you all for being here and showing up and listening. And again, this opportunity I take to my heart as an opportunity to learn more about myself, but also be a part of a legacy here with Sorenex. And Derek, thanks for coming back in my life, man. It's been a good journey. So thank you, guys. If you have any questions, bring them.
You mentioned briefly at the beginning of your talk about having a drug suspension and that leading to another sport. Can you touch on that story briefly and then maybe tie it into how that's affected you as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I began my journey in track and field in Canada, and I was living in Ponoka, Alberta. Little podunk town in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't know how I was going to actually get an education after high school. I basically had my mother, on my senior year, walk into the principal's office on my senior year, graduation year, and go, "You need to pass my daughter. This is bullshit. She's got 49% on her math test, and you need to give her that 1% so she graduates." So my mom actually fought for me to graduate high school. That's how much I loved school. And then after that, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I was throwing discus at the time, and I happened to be really good at throwing the discus. So I went to provincials. I started winning shit. I went to a junior college in central Arizona called CAC. And I worked with a coach down there called Old Man Van, and he taught me how to throw the hammer and the discus. So here I am, all of a sudden in JC, throwing the discus, throwing this hammer, and I felt like it was my one thing that was going to pull me out of small town Alberta, give me an identity, give me purpose, right? So I did that. I ended up training every day. I would be out there for 6 hours throwing the fucking discus, and then Old Man Van would come out and give me this pipe, and he's like, "Throw this pipe," and I'm throwing this pipe, and I'm throwing freaking cones, and I'm throwing all this shit for 6 hours, at this junior college. And it's barely made it through junior college. But within that, I won the NJCAA championship, and then I went to Canadian Nationals that summer, and I ended up winning Canadian Nationals. No. Got second in Canadian, no. Georgina won. Okay. Came second, and that's where I met my college coach who was recruiting there. So, Larry Judge. And he was watching and recruiting, and I just threw this discus. It was actually, this is a freaking crazy thing, at Canadian Nationals, I had one more throw left. I got there, my mom paid all my expenses to get there. We didn't have a lot of money, so that's why I was like, how am I gonna pay for school? Because I knew at this point I was just doing grants through junior college. And my mom put all this money into traveling out to Kelowna, BC, or wherever the hell we were. And I had all my discus were thrown out, and I had one more throw left. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just wasted all my mom's money. We're out here, and I'm like, what am I doing? And I step on there on the thing, and I'm like, well, if you do, you do, and you don't, you don't. And I freaking turn that freaking discus, and I cranked that shit so hard, and that discus was going out to the right, and it was coming back in, and I was like, oh, fuck, it's going to be out. And then I don't even know how I drew a discus, but that fucking thing drew hard, and it came in, and it went like 50 meters, and I was like, ah, right? So that was like the change in my life. The coach saw that. Larry saw that, and then I was like, boom, he came up to me, and he goes, you should come to South Carolina, because that's where he was at the point. We were just talking about this, Derek. I could have been to South Carolina, guys. So anyway, did that, got recruited to what ended up being the University of Wyoming. Now, this is a drawn-out answer, but this is leading you up to the whole thing, right? We're good. So we got to the University of Wyoming because Larry got a head coaching job there. Derek was with me. So I'm like, freaking Laramie, Wyoming? Like 7,000 feet, middle of nowhere. Like, it was just like cowboys and bars and like school. Like, that's what was there. All good, just like, holy shit. I moved there that summer. So all of a sudden I made something for myself, right? I paid for school, I got the scholarship, my track did that for me, and then I got to University of Wyoming, and I got a whole new lesson in being the best. So I was recruited by a coach who valued himself off wins only. So his All-Americans, how many wins he got, he didn't care about us as athletes, he cared about his All-American status and how many athletes he could get on his wall. And I say that because when I first showed up, the first things that were handed to me was DHEA, androstenedione, a bottle of protein, and some creatine, and some ephedrine. Because back then, ephedrine was what it was. So I was like, what's this? I didn't even take supplements, right? So I learned my first lesson in supplements when I got to the University of Wyoming. Not anything against the university, but the coach that was leading the program. And I was like, all right, so I started doing those things. And then we started competing. I moved to Wyoming a little bit earlier to train that summer so I'd be ready for that season because I was already 2 years in, right? So I only had 2 more years at Wyoming from my junior college time. And I was living in the basement with Kevin Mannon and Justin. So I show up and I'm like, all right, I got my supplements. I got a bed on the floor with dirty underwear from Justin. I don't even know where, like I was just sleeping on his bed. He was on the couch. And I'm camping out with these guys eating like corn, peas, and beef in the basement, like trying to get as big as I can because the other thing Larry wanted me to be was 200 pounds. So I was trying everything I possibly could to get big. I was bought in, right? I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm working with a world-class coach. This is great. So many stories to tell. I'm just going to move to the point. So after 2 years of university, I moved up the scale pretty quickly. I went from a clean and jerk of like 105 pounds to 215. I bench pressed 225 pounds. I squatted 380. I was doing all the crazy things within 2 years. So talk about fast track. Boom, 2-year fast track right there. So all of a sudden, and by the way, whole point, I never really wanted to throw the hammer. It was just a way for me to pay for school, right? But I did like winning. I liked the process. I liked the training, and I was learning how to be great. Well, the last year of Wyoming, on the Olympic qualifiers, and this is after 2 years of taking everything we possibly could that was legal at the time and not legal. And that's just the program. That's what it was. I remember my first lesson and not taking it. We're at Kansas State University, indoor weight throw, and I was already leading the nation in weight throw. You know, so I was like, I'm doing my 2-turn. I'm like, whap, whap, boom, like feeling so good. And Larry gave us these little baggies to take. And he goes, make sure you take these before you go out on the ring. And I told him, like, dude, I'm feeling good. Like, I don't need to take anything. And then what it was aspirin, ephedrine, and caffeine. Right? And I'm like, I'm fucking jazzed, just like I am right now. I'm jazzed to be here. I don't need to take shit to come up on the stage. You know? So I said, no, I'm good. I have heart. Don't challenge me on that. Right? So you can kind of see where my coaching's coming in now, guys, on the individual. So anyway, I ended up being good enough over time in that program where I was now in status to make it to the Olympics. And at that time, I wasn't literally taking anything, but I'm sure there was enough things over time that showed up that, unfortunately, the universe was trying to pull me in another direction, right? but I wasn't ready for that. Olympic trials, I won. I was really angry at the Olympic trials. Got to Olympic trials, I threw, my parents were there, they were fighting. My coach was just like there, Larry was there, had a new coach at that time. And I just remember being angry the whole time. Like it just wasn't, like here I am, Olympic, yeah, I'm the best in Canada, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Throw my throat, it's like a shitty throat. I'm like, this sucks. My attitude was just horrible. Media's trying to talk to me, and I'm just like sitting here like, yeah, it's my best throw. Like, you just won the Olympic trials. Yeah, but I threw 66 before. This is just like, just like so much lacking awareness, right? Just where I was at in my career. So I took 2 P tests after that. I took it within 20 minutes. No big deal. And that summer, we continued training, and we were getting ready to travel to Sydney. And athletics called me the day before. I was supposed to fly out. And I remember getting that call. I was working with Ian Danny at the time, and Paula Quinn was kind of involved in that a little bit, but just working with a group of guys who were like setting up my supplements, setting up my things. And I remember getting the call, and like, there's no way. Like, I thought I maybe overdosed on caffeine or something. So they said it was norandestine, which is like a derivative of like, well, you could still take it over the counter, but it could even be like Deca or anything like that, right? So when that happened, and this is why when you put something in front of you, make sure you fucking love it, because if something goes wrong and you don't love it, it really fucking hurts. So when that happened, and I realized I'm hurting for something I don't even really love, I'm just doing because I wanted to be somebody. That's probably what hurt the most. And it literally took me probably 15 years to get over that. I don't know if that answers your question, but how does that impact my coaching now? I ask the questions. I ask why you're doing what you're doing. Not because I want to get all fluffy with you, but because I want to make sure that you're in it for the right reasons. And that's our job as coaches. Our job is to make sure we're here for the right reasons. And we're helping people with what they need and not just giving them what they think they want all the time. Cool? Anything else? Any other questions? That was a good one. Thanks for asking it.
Consult and your assessment. In the public sector, when you're dealing with young athletes and we don't have cuts anymore, do you ever sit there and go, this relationship isn't working for me anymore?
Yeah.
Whether it be a cognitive or a mental or even a physical ability, and you say, as a coach, I can't train you anymore. You're not following, you're not doing what I'm asking you to do, you're not listening to me. Do you ever just step back and say, I'm done?
Give me an example.
As a coach, I've always said, I have no limits. I can take this person to the next level. But now that I'm actually coaching people in the private sector, I've had a couple of instances where I've just said, do I need to keep working with this person? I mean, they're going to pay you. And you know, Derek last year said, and I've heard him on his podcast and stuff, you don't want to, as a trainer, as a coach, have somebody pay you to coach them forever. You want to get them to a point where they can do it themselves, move on, and get to the next level so you can move on to a new goal. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you assess the person and say, I can't coach you anymore. I'm sorry, this isn't working for me. I've got to step back. Have you ever had to do that, and how would you do it? I mean, you might see them as someone you can help physically. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because all your assessments are physical, whether it be the T-test or the overhead squat or whatever, but do you look at them and go, I really can't help you
Yeah.
you need to go to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, we can't look at physical as by itself. This is a spiritual, emotional, physical journey. You know, it's like I can't help somebody without the other piece. So in the consult and getting to know somebody, and again, you got to stay in your lane too. Like when I say stay in your lane, can you guys hear me? Okay. Like you gotta decide what you want to take on too, right? So if I'm dealing with an athlete who's not showing me all his cards or her cards, you're right. It's going to be all of a sudden, it's like, well, this doesn't make sense. You said you wanted to do this, but you're doing this, right? So that's a misalignment. So I would call that shit out immediately and know what that might mean. They don't like it and that they don't want to work with you anymore. That's okay. Find a coach who's going to deal with that. There's plenty of them. Meaning deal with it, meaning like give them what they think they need or what they want, right? When you're trying to get them back to what they need. But I think when an athlete comes to you and you do the assessment, you do all that, and they're just not following it, then I would just go back to the consult. Dude, you said you wanted to do this. So what's going on? Just ask the question. You guys, it's not about having answers. It's about continuing asking questions. Because we don't have the fucking answers. We don't know people to the depths of their souls, right? But I can keep asking a question. You said this, but you're doing this. Why? Right? And it just constantly keep digging. Well, that's interesting. Well, why did you say that? Well, that's interesting. Like, I'm noticing this, right? It's just constantly digging, man. And then there's a point where it's just like, yep, it's just not going to work, and that's okay. That's okay, because you have principles, you have beliefs, you have core values that you're standing on, and that's where you can leverage yourself. Like I said, I'm not going to train an athlete who's not taking care of themselves in terms of putting themselves to bed at time, turning their screens off before bed, hydrating themselves, and eating properly. I'm not going to pretend that that's okay not to do. It's like, no, that's shit you have to do. And when you're ready to do it, then you're going to come to me. Any other questions? That was a good one. Thanks, Elmer. That's it? All right, you guys. Oh, yeah. No, right here. Hold on.
I threw at a small school a number of years ago.
Yep.
Didn't have a throws coach, didn't have anything, but I had one video when I learned how to throw the weight.
Yep.
And that was watching you and Kevin Mannon over and over and over
You
again.
have a video of me throwing the weight?
Yeah. And so that was literally like, you know, as a small school, you don't have a throws coach.
Yeah.
And so I've probably seen you throw, and that was more instrumental in regards to my success in throwing the weight and everything else. And so very excited. One, thank you for being very candid in regards to talking about, you know, the drug use and everything else, but very excited to. So thank you for speaking here today. So just kind of cool to see things come full circle.
Yeah, man, yeah. I want that video, by the way. No, just kidding. Awesome, guys. Again, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thanks for listening. I know it's kind of drawn out, but hope you picked a few nuggets out of that. And I hope to come back potentially next year and share even some more. But enjoy the weekend. It has been an amazing weekend. And thanks again.